The year is 1996. Broken Arrow is sweeping the US box office, British boy band Take That is disbanded, and Pokémon Red and Green has just launched in Japan. Only one of these events would kick off a legacy 30 years in the making, and no, I'm not talking about Robbie Williams' solo career. Shortly after its Japanese release, Pokémon went worldwide and carried with it a state of mass Pokemania. The public couldn't get enough of Nintendo and Game Freak's creation. What started as a Pokédex of just 151 Pocket Monsters would grow to upwards of 900. With the release of Scarlet and Violet, that total will surpass 1,000 creatures of all shapes, sizes and origins. That's a lot to take in, and there's no sign of the franchise slowing down anytime soon. We can assume those numbers will just keep growing and growing. Out of this vast roster, there are only a select few creations which have shed light on the all-important question about the game's universe. Where did they all come from? And which Pokémon came first? That's the question I'm going to answer today, but I'll warn you in advance, it's not a simple answer. If you want the mystery solved quickly, we can take it at surface level. What was the first Pokémon? Well, given that every Pokémon has a designated Pokédex number, maybe we just have to look at entry 001, which is Bulbasaur. So if you wanted to know the first Pokémon based purely on an organisational sense, then the quest is over. The answer is Bulbasaur. But I know that's not what you're looking for, so let's dig a little deeper. Let's think back prior to the game's release, before the world got accustomed to Golbats, Gengars and Glooms, and the rest of the original 151. The game's designers had to start somewhere. If only we knew which Pokémon they physically created first, maybe we'd be getting somewhere. Well, the good news is we definitely do know which one they made first. It was Rhydon. Despite appearing at number 112 in the Pokédex, this was where it all started, so to speak. Rhydon's creator, Ken Sugimori, used the creature as a jumping off point. The original plan was to have the rest of the designs follow its trend and be modelled after dinosaurs. Another early concept for Lapras confirms this trend, although this concept didn't last long. As I'm sure you're well aware, many of the 151 designs don't bear much of a resemblance to dinosaurs at all. But Rhydon certainly does, and its influence can be felt across the first generation, with badges and statues modelled around its likeness, and references to its image scattered across the world. If you've ever wondered what that was about, well, now you know. So if you want the surface level answer to the question, what was the first Pokémon? The answer is Rhydon. Oh, we've got loads of time left. Let's keep digging. So while the Rhydon answer may satisfy a select few of you, I'm certain that doesn't scratch the itch for the vast majority. Let's look at the Pokémon who, in the lore, was widely agreed to be the creator of the original 151 and beyond, Mew. Its role in the Pokémon universe, as well as its inclusion in the games, is enigmatic at best. The first thing to note, and this does put a strain on our goal to find a simple and concise answer to our question, Mew was never supposed to be in the first set of games. Nintendo wasn't aware of its inclusion. In fact, Red and Green had already finished its final debugging phase, and the game designers were told not to touch the project nor tamper with it. But the cartridges had a whole 3,000 bytes of space left on them. Just enough room for an inexplicable Pokémon that would irreversibly change the franchise's lore. And so designer and coder Shigeki Morimoto snuck Mew into the game on the remaining memory, and no one was any the wiser. Players couldn't either encounter or catch the Pokémon organically. It was there, but also wasn't. However, there were two other Pokémon in the 151 which corroborated Mew's position as an important piece of the puzzle, Mewtwo and Ditto. As the story goes, Mewtwo is the result of man-made experiments to create a clone of Mew, and Ditto is the result of efforts that didn't go to plan. So Ditto's whole deal is being able to transform into any and all Pokémon at will. Aside from being a neat party piece, it sheds light onto an important aspect of Mew. It contains the DNA of all Pokémon in the world. So, Mew is related to every Pokémon, and the running theory from the greatest academic minds within the Pokémon universe is that Mew is their common ancestor, and everything from your Finians to Feebasses is a direct descendant. This idea is reinforced by several entries in the game's Pokédex, and whilst those aren't usually the most ironclad source of information, they're all we've got to work with. So there, the OG Pokémon is Mew, and that was widely accepted as canon and fact. even if it did get included in the series under strange circumstances. But that theory would get derailed a few generations later with the introduction of a few other mythical Pokémon that made the family tree a whole lot more complicated. So the fourth generation of games, Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, introduced with them a very important set of Pokémon that would forever shatter Mew's status as the undisputed original Pokémon. Firstly, there were the creation trio, Dialga, Palkia and Giratina. As indicated by their names, these Pokémon bordering on deities were present at the moment of creation and had control over reality, time and space. This gives them a legitimate claim to be the very first Pokémon, given that they were the first things in existence in the universe. But if only it was so simple in Pokémon lore. In fact, they themselves were created by another, something that existed before existence, was real before reality, and is our new top contender for the very first Pokémon, Arceus. So this is where it jumps from complex to headache-inducing. But bear with me. Think of the creation trio as the Big Bang that created our universe. Before them, there was nothing. And after that fateful moment, there was everything. Time and space and existence had been created where there once was naught. Now, there's a lot of debate as to what definitively caused the Big Bang, and I'm not going to offer any suggestions there, as otherwise we'll be here all day. All I'm saying is that in the Pokémon equivalent, the Big Bang wasn't a freak occurrence, it was caused by Arceus. Arceus created Dialga and Palkia, and in doing so created time and space. Arceus is the first Pokémon. Mystery solved, case closed. But is it? Any of you looking for a definitive, absolute answer to the question we posed are going to hate me for this. And I'm sorry, but I have to ask, what created Arceus? As far as Pokémon lore goes, Arceus hatched from an egg which triggered creation of the entire known universe. But who laid that egg? I'd recommend you to buckle yourself in for this next part, because this is going to get a bit unhinged. I propose this. Ditto is a failed clone of Mew. Ditto can transform into all Pokémon because it has the remnants of Mew's DNA. Mew has the DNA of all Pokémon it created. Ditto can transform into Arceus, therefore it must have its DNA. The egg that Arceus hatched from came from Mew, which leads us to an impasse. Because it's been established that Arceus created everything, so how could it create Mew to allow it to hatch the egg that creates it? It is, quite aptly, a chicken and egg situation. Which came first? Well, here's the kicker. The creation trio originated from Arceus, but before it hatched, there was no time. Which came first doesn't matter, because there is no first. Without time, there's no before nor after. So, in a mishmash of non-linear, non-existing time, could it be that Mew and Arceus both created each other? The chicken and the egg were both intrinsically linked in a way that no one can truly comprehend. Well, maybe. And if that's the case, I wouldn't be able to comprehend it, so it's a possibility. But opening that pickle jar makes even more problematic questions arise. Did Arceus or Mew create humans in the Pokémon universe? Did humans evolve from their creations? And how on earth can a deity that created time, space, existence and itself be contained within a little metal ball you can pick up at any Pokémart? So let's take all that massive bundle of conspiracy, fan theory and headache-inducing multi-dimensional timelines, put that all to one side and offer up another explanation. Maybe we're looking way too far into all this. Before Mew was conceived by the game designers, maybe there simply was nothing that created all Pokémon. They were just there. Then with Mew, they had a backstory and a bit of lore, and that worked. Then a bit later, rather than having a time-bending, reality-altering hypothesis as to how Mew and Arceus were both the creators, maybe they just changed their mind. And the Mew story worked, but let's try something new. In that instance, they're both the first Pokémon, just at different milestones in Pokémon's history. They don't have to both be correct, and one's existence doesn't make the other invalid. Just at a point, the creators decided to flip the script and move on. So we go back to our original question. Who was the first Pokémon? It's clear there is no plain answer. There is one complex answer and one headache-inducing one. The simpler version is that the first Pokémon was Mew. up until Generation 4, when the introduction of Arceus made that invalid. Therefore, Arceus is the winner. The more finicky answer is that Mew and Arceus are both simultaneously the first Pokémon, and they somehow created each other at the same time, before time was even a thing. So it somehow works. But one small point to make that undermines both of these answers. This is all coming from notes and Pokédex entries, which are wildly inconsistent throughout the games. And it honestly might be the case that the fan theories are thinking much more about this than the game designers ever intended. I'm not entirely sure that Shigeki Morimoto had any of this on his mind when he secretly programmed Mew into the game 2 weeks before its completion. The reality is he probably just saw the free space in the cartridge and thought, let's have some fun. But who am I to say that he hasn't orchestrated this entire thing, and that we are only scratching the surface of one of the most complex webs in video game lore? As for me, if asked again which Pokémon came first, I think I know what my answer will be. I'll just say Rhydon and be done with it. And that's all for today. I'm off. All that talk of chicken and eggs, I think it's time for an early dinner. I'll catch you next time, trainers.